So yeah,
Okay.
it is very interesting, Mr. Tuttle, and there's all sorts of directions that it can go. But the most important thing, and people are asking the question, this is the segue, like how do I put NFTs to use? Well, you put yourself to use. Like the more valuable you are, the more business you have, the more people you have interested in your stuff, then the more like Gary V you are, and the more possibility there is to have an epic NFT play. I think you still really need something original, something powerful, and that is definitely what you have with your new program that you've released for the feet. So I want to go through how that's gone for you in the first what up to 21 days, and yeah, talk us through like the journey of the return to run program.
So that's a great question. I would love to talk more about my program. It makes me so excited. So basically this idea is, and ask questions on this because a lot of this is tied into operations on social media, because, you know, you start to get people that will recognize you for certain things. So basically what I ended up doing was looking. So it's an exploration of what I was going through with my feet. So years ago, I had gotten to this point where it grew up not really having any injuries, not having any problems or pain in my body. And then all of a sudden I had this really bad ankle sprain my freshman year of college, and that kind of spiraled down. And so I don't know if a lot of you guys have had this experience where there's one injury that kind of becomes this watershed, and you start to funnel down of like, if your body's no longer what it used to be. So that's, for me, it was an ankle that turned into low back pain, and then back, so ankle sprain, and then turned into low back pain, the chronic shoulder dislocations. And then it turned into, this idea, like my calf was always tight, hamstrings were tight, my glutes were tight on this left side. So everything on my left side of my body started to fail. And then, it wasn't until I started to realize that, like, okay, well, maybe if I go back to this first ankle sprain and this idea that, because most people think about ankle sprains and foot injuries as though it's not really that significant of a deal. It's like, I just rolled my ankle and then they move on. Like, Steph Curry's had 514. So at some point was one. And so, we get this perspective where it's like, it's not that big of a deal, so we don't think too much about it. And then once I started to kind of, I guess, get more curious about your body, because there's a certain point where you're growing up and you start to lift, you're just following there's an obsession that goes in, what can your body do? How much can I lift? How fast can I run? And you start thinking about the output, and you don't necessarily think about let's say, the quality of it. Think about it with food, for example. If there's a certain point where you are obsessed about macronutrients and micronutrients, getting the vitamins and macros and making sure you get your protein and, how it tastes, and put it in your Tupperware containers and microwaving and all that stuff. But at some point you start to realize, like, okay, well, what does this look like? What is the quality of my diet? What is the quality of the food? Where does it come from? What's the sourcing? What are the nutrients? And so it's the same thing, same food, but there's a different focus and attention to it. And so that's, as I started to pay attention to, like, how am I moving? How's my body feeling? I looked at my feet and I'm like, oh, that's weird. It seems so simple in hindsight, but there's this day that I remember looking at my feet and I'm like, wait, one foot is turned out and one foot's forward, and my hips are totally shifted. And then when I walk, do I always walk like that? And I had someone take a video of me walking, and it was really embarrassing, because I'm like, that doesn't look like an athlete. That looks like somebody who's getting standing up for the first time and barely moving around. And so it was this process at that point of saying, okay, well, I'm just wearing these shoes, and I probably should walk normally, like straight, and I don't think one foot should be collapsed. Like, how could it still be collapsed? I never had foot problem. Wait, I did. I had the ankle sprain. And then you start to think back, and so then I'm like, okay, well, let me actually start to fix this stuff. And at that point, my feet, I had a turf toe, which is inflammation at the sesamoid metatarsal phalange joint, that big toe, like the ball, the knuckle of the big toe. Then like plantar fasciitis. So my feet just stiff and tight, and it wasn't working. I had knee pain like nothing else. Like that was patellar tendonitis. Just I had done the stupid squat every day thing for with Matthew Perry. I think I did it.
I love that book.
Great.
It's such a good book.
It's so good. If you need like it's a very short, well done book, but he's like one of the original strength philosophers. Like the idea that people that just sit under a bar and think about life. Those are, Socrates if he lifted weights. So I was doing that, but I did none of the prep work around it. So if you're not engaging your glutes, you're not engaging your core, you're just squatting every day, you're overloading one thing. And my knee started to ache, which thanks to Ben Patrick, I now know about. But I started looking at this and I'm like, my back was going out, my knees, I'm like, something's not right. So I started fixing. I'm like, well, maybe I start fixing my feet. So first you go to Amazon. This is everybody's progression. They go to Amazon, they go minimalist shoes. And they're like, oh, those are expensive. And you look at like Vivos at $160 or, I don't know, Australian is like $400. But, you go to EV and then you find like, well, I could do the Vibrams, but I'm not, that's weird. Who wants to wear their toes out? Like some losers. And then you're like, well, I got these $30 pair of shoes and I made it, Tanzania or something like that. And so I'm like, I'll buy those. And they would last for 2 months. And I put duct tape on the bottom. They last for 2 months more. And so I just started, doing that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm wearing the flat shoes and I'm flopping around. People think I'm wearing water shoes. That's cute. And then, I'm like, okay, well, that's good. But now I still remember the first day I went out for a run. Because I'm like, oh, you got to fix your running form, right? You can't run under heels. Because I ran track and cross country forever. And amazingly, no one talks about how to run in a sport that's about running. Amazingly, right? That's crazy. You'd think so. So in case you ever see these marathon runners that run on their heels, is like people just, especially the people from these poor countries, they just get up and they run. It's the only thing they have. And it's like, all this, you run in one way with shoes and flip-flops. And then all of a sudden, some corporate guy from Nike comes in and says, you got a lot of promise here. Let's try. We want to sponsor your track team. And they say, here are 15 pairs of shoes. And it's like, you see these, if you ever watch these videos where these like just bone thin guys are running through these very dirt poor streets, but they got these fresh white Nikes. It's like, there's a reason they don't have a Nike outlet in Sudan. It's like in the middle of some of these smaller villages. And then of course they wear them, and it's like, you can't run if you have thick sole shoes that are 2 inches thick. You cannot run on the forefoot. It just doesn't happen. Like they're curved, they're pointy, they're like the little boats. It's just crazy. Anyway, so I was like, fuck that, I don't need that. So I'm gonna go and just run on my forefeet. So I remember I went on this run and I got back and it was like it's just 2-mile little loop around some concrete. And my calves were so blown up. It was just unbelievable. Like they were just balloons. And that was like, yeah, you expect that. But then my shins, like I got shin splints immediately. Like it was the first time I decided I'm going to go for a run and fix it. And it was like, oh, okay. And they lasted forever. So like, I'm talking, my foot is still flat. I'm wearing weird shoes. I don't have any control. I hadn't even gotten to the toes and understood more of the mechanics, but I'm trying to walk you through this progression of, everyone that starts thinking about their feet, they just, I just got to get better shoes. And then that's good. It's like, no, it's like literally the first step in the door. And if you do it too quickly, you're going to end up with worse pain and worse problems. And, so plantar fasciitis got worse. Your shin splints got worse. And so at some point I'm like, I got to back up because I was still fat and powerlifting. But, I'm trying to figure all these pieces out because I had no guidance. I had no direct program. I had no you do this and this is normal and this is not normal. You should wear this shoe, then this shoe. And then it's like, you should understand your toes should move. But, this is the process. So this kind of began this thing where I was like, okay, well, let me start to think about how my feet are moving. And wait, I can move my toes. Oh, wait, my big toe moves and that helps my glutes. And then all of a sudden I started to build that left ankle up and lo and behold, my back get fixes because my SI joint, I created what's called like a functional leg length discrepancy. So it's this idea that you have one leg that's shorter than the other, but it seems it's typically people put the heel lifts in, which I put a little post on my Instagram story the other day about how much I hate those because it's like you're gonna lift your hip up and then put it back down when you take your shoe off, up and down, up and down. It's like you want to mess your back up, do that all day. But what happened is my left archer collapsed in. And so the tibia, and what happens, you get this entire rotation. So if you've ever played a sport where you rotate and your hips shift, you will get your tibia rotates internally. So your foot, if you ever see a collapsed foot, like a foot that's a flat arch, the tibia rotates in, the foot rotates out. So the inside of the tibia sits lower. It actually collapses down the structure. So your talus on the inside, and then all the tarsals on that medial chain collapse in. You get an internal rotation, which turns your knee in, causes knee pain. Not to mention the big toe will go out and move. So, that was the biggest problem underneath my hips is that, my one foot's sinking. And so now I'm literally putting my spine at an uneven level. Because like if you have a leg length discrepancy, you're kind of born with it, or it really happens in puberty. It doesn't come on. It doesn't start when you're, 24, 23, 24, 25. It's like that's something different is happening. Anyway, so like you start to build up and I started to explore and try different movements and move my toes. And at first they're cramping, they're weak, nothing's happening. And then, they start to get a little bit stronger. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it becomes a snowballing thing that now it's like, whereas before I literally would have just been like running would have been, I had to go do my warm up, had to have my cleats, had to have my tights, had my special socks, I had to go out and like do all my stuff and get, like actually do a training prep. And now I'm like, it's now I go barefoot sprinting and it's a lot of fun. So there's a lot of pieces in between there, but that's kind of the general progression. Any of that tracking with that? Any questions on that?
I think it's such an important message, man. There's so many people. I had ankle surgery when I was maybe 20 and had shin splints for a long time. The minimalist thing wasn't really on the radar at that stage. I don't think, it was very difficult to find anyone who was talking about that. What was spoken about was orthotics, so I got put into these super high orthotics, and that's actually when I rolled my ankle and had to get surgery. And then I rolled it again in about a year later and missed out on a massive tournament. So the orthotics is like the other way that people tend to go, if it's not just kind of like buzzing around in the minimalists. But yeah, like I think there are very few athletes who feel super comfortable to sprint in bare feet now. And that's, other joints can be working really well and prep can be going really well. And still, that piece is not there. So I think that this is such a valuable, important conversation. And not every athlete needs it. As you say, the other leg was fine and the other foot's fine. And if you haven't had an injury and if both your feet look good, then, happy days, lucky for you. But the question is once things go wrong, what's the system to get it right again? And as much as, sleds and just kind of getting back to it is good if it works. There might be other cases where you need to, take it a step further.
Well, what had happened is interesting under your point with that, because what the worst case of turf toe for me was on my healthy foot, because you will end up compensating. What you don't think about is that if you go to, if you're wearing socks, whatever, look at your feet. The markers of a healthy foot are your toes straight, meaning do they point straight out? And the big toe, most importantly, the big toe, there's aesthetics. Are your toes straight? And does your big toe turn in with the bunion? So if you're looking this, or does it kind of like turn in? And so almost always when you have any type of ankle sprain, that there's an actual, or 5 muscles that attach to the foot. I guess maybe 6, depending on how you count the extension muscles, but you've got a flexor brevis at the toe, a flexor hallucis longus, which I know you all know what that is because that's the FHL calf raise. That attaches at the calf, but it flexes the big toe and the whole foot. You got a muscle for adduction that squeezes in. You got a muscle for extension. You have an extensor brevis. It's a short intrinsic one, and then an extensor longus that attaches on the shin. It kind of merges right behind the anterior tibialis. But you have a muscle specifically for abduction, meaning that it pulls the big toe away. Now, if you look at this, it's hard to do with a hand because the thumb's shifted, but notice the hand and the thumb came from the same structure. So they you can see the anatomy at the same place. But if your thumb turns in, now your big toe turns in, then you don't have the capacity to push off on that. And what happens is you turn out. So there's this, I'll pull up in a second, but if that big toe is how you drive. At least I might have this to pull up. Wait, oh yeah. Let me I don't know if I can share this. Yes, I can. All right. This picture I found, so I don't know if you see these guys right here. It blows my mind how accurate this picture is. So this is Asafa Powell, and I don't know this guy, but this guy is just a stud. And you can just see, one of these guys looks really good, and one of these guys looks like he's really trying. And this guy, is obviously just crushing it. Notice the line from the big toe through the fascia, through that medial longitudinal arch into the ankle, where the ankle is loaded up, and the entire tibia, ankle, knee, and hip rotate internally as you push. So you step, you externally rotate, and this works. You see how you say right here at the very edge, you invert your foot. So you turn your foot in just a little bit. You strike with the 4th and 5th metatarsal, which is, let's see. This all works. Blurry feet. The 4th and 5th metatarsal is the outside of the foot. So, and you see or put over here, that's your pinky toe and the toe beside it. So that the ball of that foot, you invert just a little bit. And then as you strike, you roll through to that big toe and then you push off of it. And then what happens is as that whole ankle and everything locks, you push off the big toe. So now what happens is if you have an ankle, say, bunion foot. Now, if you have one of these puppies, where these are extreme, but most people look somewhere, yeah, I'm gonna use an extreme example, but let's say the foot turns out, so the foot collapses in, right? Now, instead of being able to push off that big toe, oh, this is perfect, a mild bunion. That's what most people get, especially if you have some level of ankle sprain and a collapsed arch, because guess what? The medial longitudinal arch, medial arch foot. So this right here that lines up and gets this big toe straight that gets injured. We collapse on the outside, we tear ligaments and damage on the outside of the ankle, which always affects the inside as well. And so when that collapses, what happens is that big toe, foot anatomy. See, this big toe turns inward. And then when that can't spread, and when you can't get foot, toe, splay, when you can't spread, here, there's a great example. So when your foot looks like this, which is what happens when you have shoes all the time and your arches collapse, and you can't spread the big toe, this guy's got weird feet, so just ignore that. But here's another example. When you can't do that, and then this happens and turns in because you start to shape like the shoe, you start to see the toes get crunched in, the pinky toe is no longer working, then guess what? You cannot push off that big toe. And then you end up externally rotating the foot because you are so stiff and you're trying to push through the ball. You push through the ball of this as opposed to engaging the big toe. Now, why does it matter if you push through the big toe? Because the big toe is one of the primary extensors or engagers of the glute. So if you're sitting down and you try and squeeze your glute, right? You just kind of do that. That's one thing. You may get, really, you're not going to get much, but you're going to get a little bit of it. You can pop around. By the way, I see you bopping. I see the heads popping. I love it. If you grab the ground with that big toe, wherever you're doing, you squeeze the ground with the big toe, all of a sudden, oh, wow. Like you can squeeze your big toe and grab the ground with that, the flexor digitorum brevis. But anything you're trying to do, that flexor hallucis longus, that engages that is your proprioceptive feedback cue that you need to grab the ground, because your feet would always be on the ground. They would never not be on the ground. So any type of hamstring and posterior chain work that doesn't have the feet engaged, which is why it blows my mind that we do Nordics without grabbing the back of the wall with the feet, because that is how you grab the ground. That's like saying I'm gonna throw a football without grabbing the ball. Like it just doesn't happen. You know, that's your fingers are to your hand, what your toes are to your foot. But when we run and we think about our whole foot like a flipper, a paddle, as opposed to a hand that we can grab the ground, then we don't engage the muscles. And then when we go to run, we try to get everything but. And you see how big this guy's quads are? But he's also losing. I mean, he's shorter, so it's not an apples to apples thing, but he's trying to muscle it through and force it. And he's using elasticity, power, and the power of his body to get this, to drive his knees up. His hip flexors are stronger. I mean, it just, everything is so different. I get it's one picture. So it's kind of like, you know, taking a blood glucose measure and telling you that's how your heart healthy, your what do we call it? The pancreas is. But point being, you see these conversations, right? So that's why it matters. And all of this goes back to, if you can't spread your big toe out and you can't push through that, then what happens is you start to push and rotate. And when I'm pushing and rotate with my left foot, because my left big toe is collapsed on my left arch, and then guess what's taking the load? My right toe, my right big toe foot. And then that creates the metatarsal phalangeal inflammation. The turf toe turns into plantar fasciitis, which turns, and that's related. There's a study I was reading that's related to Achilles tendonitis, where you get thickening the plantar fascia. That's actually a ligament that goes under the foot. It connects to the transverse arch at the balls of the feet to the heel. That connective tissue is related to the paratendon of the Achilles. And there's a guy who was talking yesterday, or on the what do you call it, Telegram thing, about how he's got Achilles irritation at that joint. Well, you get your Achilles tendon that goes there, but you have your what's called your paratendon, which is like this tissue that wraps around the outside, and it all flows together at that joint. So you plantar fascia, your Achilles tendon, and then your Achilles tendon is inside that. All that stuff is there. And there's actually a correlation between thicker plantar fascia in cadavers they study and people who had Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis. What happens is you thicken the ligament, you thicken the tendon around it. And just like with knees, if you're looking at patellar tendonitis, the inflammation and the tear around the breakdown of the tendon causes a thickening of that ligament as it heals. So just like scar tissue, you will grow back thicker. So if you're dealing with this stuff, a lot of times it's because you're not getting the big toe fascial lines. So there's fascial lines under the feet, the entire back of the body. You're not working and pulling that. So that's what it matters. If you don't have that big toe, you can't spread it out and push through the ground, then you're going to turn the foot out and you're going to rotate, which collapses the ankle in. You're going to get, just to go back to a beautiful visual. this guy right here, he's loading passively through this. He's using all this tension, but these are where you start to think, okay, well, this is where you get shin splints because the ankle's collapsing in. You're running through. And we can talk all about heel striking and all the different problems and pains that you have. I mean, I could go on for hours, but it really matters a lot. And so the point is, if you don't have the quality of your feet, and they matter a lot, and even if you've never had an ankle injury, you may you're definitely not in a negative, but you can be at a 0. That's like saying I've never had a knee injury, so I probably can squat as great. It's like, well, no, if you've never squatted, you never tried it, then you're not going to be able to do that. So there is so much, and it just blows my mind that no one talks about it. Well, I mean, people talk about it, but I don't know. But what I would say is that I think you can't look at knees and be a successful coach if you don't first start at the ground. And part of the principles of ATG is building from the ground up. So I take that seriously, because I think I have yet to meet someone that's got healthy feet and bad knees. Or I've yet to meet anybody that's got bad knees and healthy feet. Like, it just says you can't get, the knees are just the awkward stepchild, they're just there. And, while Ben's done an amazing thing to build up the VMOs and the quads, it's like almost everybody that's got knee problems, it's like, yeah, well, your feet are shit too. And so let's look at those. And almost always it builds it up. They're two related. It's not like a knees or the feet. It's both and. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think you can get a lot of foot development from the ATG programs, right? Like if you're doing the FHL calf raises, if you're doing the sleds, there's definitely, people will notice that their plantar fascias are burning, and that you are getting development. It doesn't mean there can't be a specialization. I think that the foot alignment, the toe alignment is probably not going to correct itself without some awareness. If you're wearing narrow shoes, if you have no awareness of the abduction ability of the big toe, it's probably not going to correct itself. Yeah.
Even socks too. Like, you look at, why would socks be restrictive? Well, Nike sells these fancy compression socks that are like binding, and like things that bind your toes in, especially if you're weak, they will limit your proprioceptive feedback. So, there's a certain point where almost all injuries come from loading the joints and the bones, as opposed to the muscles and the tendons. We want to load the passive structure, so the fascia, muscles, tendon, versus the joints and the bones. And if we don't have the ability to adjust to the surface we're on, so the hard part, and the last point to what you said, is this idea that, I go and sprint barefoot partly because, there is some level of a gimmick. I don't need to go do that. I actually think I feel better, and I am faster when I don't wear shoes. The only thing that gets you is just a start. Like, it's hard to grab the ground, but that's where you can get over that a little bit. But it's more to demonstrate, because it's like, when you look and you see that, you can't always see what's going on at the foot unless you have, if you don't have, let's say, a visual to it. But, so it's not like I'm sitting there saying, I need to go and run barefoot, because it's like, no, I'm trying to demonstrate that this is what your feet can do. So like, that's part of it. But I don't need, and I don't ever tell athletes, I actually train them how to run barefoot, because if you can do that, you can wear shoes, but not vice versa. But there's no sport where being able to run barefoot is helpful. But if you can run barefoot, you have healthy feet. So that's what I look and say, of the scale of things we want to work on. If I look at a metric to say, let's like say, if I had to pick one number to see how well Keegan is doing in life, I just, what's his profit margin in his business? It's like, does that mean he's happy and never play everywhere else? Like, no, but in general, if he's doing this, it probably means he's doing something that's successful, means he probably cares about, you could figure out one metric. And it's like, if I look at someone and say, how healthy are you? It's like, can you sprint barefoot? Because if you can, you get healthy feet, and then everything else up the chain is good. But if you can't, then, that's the eye test of like, okay, well, something's breaking down. So.
Sure, there's questions. Yeah, guys want to jump in with questions, feedback.
I could talk for a long time. So just interrupt me. All right, range.
Hello, can you hear me? What's up, Graham?
Oh yeah.
What's up, brother? Yeah, so for someone with symptoms such as that, I see quite a bit, like toes that can't splay, collapsed arches. What are some kind of, whether there be movement exercises? I know Keegan has done a lot of like the toe lifts and the short range, long range toe flexion and extension, but what are some things you would do? Because I work with a lot of clients who generally have like the toes are just really, really narrow, can't really move them, can't really splay them. What are some things you would do for them?
So just let's see, these are, so just for the program alone, these are all the foot, ankle, and drills. So I haven't even done the running drills, but like, so, you know, that's the calf at the very bottom, but like every one of these is a foot and ankle drill you can start working on. So just so you know that there is a whole lot of stuff to work on. Not all these are the most valuable things you need to do, but at some level they are. The single, if I had to give you one, let's go with the foot hand glove. This one, oh, wait, does it, hold on. I realized I got to do share. Let's do desktop too. All right, this makes sense. You see this?
Yep.
So you see this simple one where you're now getting the big toe. It's the foot hand glove. So basically you are taking your hands and working them in between your feet. Now, there's a few things with this exercise. See how there's one thing, you're increasing the pliability. So the first thing, if you have people, and this is something they might not want to do at the gym, but you can basically direct them to this, which I'll move back here, play that. How do I share, copy? Where's the chat? All right, so in case you want to, like, just as a reference for this, because I walk over this, I talk through this with that's the link to it, but I talk through it with like instructions of what you're doing. But the first thing you have to do is get curious with your feet. You have to be able to understand, like, okay, the feet are like my hand. My hand, what does a healthy hand look like? I can move and have dexterity of my toes and my fingers. I can flex, I can cup and create the arch at my foot. I can use my palm, I can articulate my thumb, I can do all these things, but that you have to have the curiosity with your feet. So the first thing with this is the single best exercise, the hand foot glove, is start to play around with this. And so you hear a lot of things, people talk about foot spacers and they say, okay, I want to put my foot spacers in. I've never used them, but what they end up being is passive movement. So they don't fix the problem. They can help if you're wearing them 20, 30 minutes a day to try and create that. But a lot of people say, I got my minimalist shoes and got my foot spacers, look at me go. It's like, no, that's like saying, you know, it's like, I've got my, you know, I got my workout clothes and I got my brace. Look at me, I'm working out. It's like, well, no, there's a lot more nuance to it. And so the first thing is to understand, you want to play with your feet and get this dexterity, work between your toes and start to get them to move and then actively engage with that. So that's the first thing I'd look at. Then, you know, once you start to get that, there's all kinds of, let's say the big toe, there's a whole lot of stuff with the big toe, but let's see the lateral, big toe lateral stretch. This one, so this is you stand up and you can just stretch. You basically put your big toe and you curl under and you pull and open that up. So you're creating this internal space. So if you want to go back to foot, sorry, I know it's probably a rookie thing to just Google the stuff, but it works. So let's see, straight on view of it. There's so much, oh, perfect. There's so much stuff you could figure out from this. So these are from, you know, just studying, looking at all these pieces, but you start to look at this. This is I think this is the bottom. So this is from a view from the bottom. You can start to, this is the adductor. This is the abductor hallucis. So it pulls open. Then you've got your flexor brevis, flexor hallucis brevis, and you get your adductor. So you start to see this all is there. So when you're looking at this, and this is the major, you get lots of fascial lines as well. So you start to see here is a tremendous, very thick tissue, the fascial connective tissue underneath that supports that. So you can start to get this as the transverse, the arch up here, and all these different pieces that hold the big toe in addition to, yeah, so you start to see this. So stretching is not useful as like a static thing from change. So there's two things. Stretching is useful to help. Stretching under load is useful to help with the, to rewire the fascial lines of the body. So that's what we do. You know, Keegan's life-changing long range bicep curls, things like the knee over toe squats. Let's say as an example, ATG split squat, we're getting this long, you're rewiring the fascial line along the front of that, the hip flexor. But when you're looking at this, like that's all it is. It's not going to change it. You have to get the muscle. So you start to look at this big toe lateral. It's like you load that, all the structures between this first and second metatarsal, you can stay and start to open and pull that up, right? So that's the first step. And then you can go for the next part, which is start to work. I mean, there's the pulls. So you would do that same piece. Yeah, so you pull and you lower, and then you actively pull it back up. Then you start working on that as a thing. But ultimately the goal is, and these are, you know, if you can stand up and do these, your big toe abductions. And so this might not be, yeah, whatever, get the ads. What you would look at is say, can I stand with my feet beside one another and move my big toe? So can I pull? That is the ultimate thing. If you could do that, so you're there and you can pull open and get them to touch. If you could do that without a lot of compensation at the calf and the leg, then you're good. And you'll start to feel that. But that right there, being able to stand, that's the mark right there. That's physically what you're looking for. So that's where you want to go through and from that level. Let's see. And then the other one thing I would say that's really good with the big toe, long term. So I put up a picture where you're holding it. Let's say the big toe, half kneeling. This is a marker of like, can you get to this position? You tuck that big toe, and really the pinky toe is there, but you tuck the big toe and you sit back on your heel. Like, can you get this fascial line all the way from under the foot that's connected through here and get that knee down? If you can do that without serious pain, you're generally in a good spot. But then you want to think, you know, can I start to actively work on that? And that's where you would look at something like a big toe alternating lifts. Like this is really tough. This is a level 5 or 6 on the progression. But you see, I'm literally supporting I'm in a plank or a push-up position. I'm supporting my body weight on that big toe. Now you start to see the strength that's required to have as you flex and extend the toes differently, and you lift up and you pull. There's a progression to work up to that, because long-term, we want to think, can I put my big toe, if I stand on the ledge, can I put my big toe and hold that position? So that's what I would show you and think on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick follow-up on the other end. Is there any movements that are common that you see are causing kind of a negative effect on foot function, balance?
Meaning, like, so basically, are you saying, are there movements like that you do your feet that negatively affect your feet?
Yeah, that you'd probably kind of take a step back before and address some kind of your foot before getting back into them?
Okay. So basically you're saying, like, if your knees hurt, would you not squat all the way down until your knees are better, kind of thing? In general, when people have problems, it's almost always with this big toe fascial line. So if you have any type of irritation along this metatarsal phalange joint, so turf toe, for example, anything in there, that's when, like, and that's why I said, like, this long term, that the FHL fascial line underneath here, that's what you got to work on. But that's why there's a 6-part progression, and there's no such thing as a bad movement, so to speak. But there is, there are movements you're not prepared for. And when it comes to this, if you've not done anything with your feet, like, it's taken me some time. That's why I have the 28-day program, is to take you from like step 1 and build you all the way up, because it's like there's a whole week for the foot intrinsic motions, there's a whole week for the ankle, a whole week for the lower leg, and a whole week for just running drills and starting to put it all together, compound movements. But you know, there's no such thing. Most people are starting at such a deficit that they really have no capacity to even do this stuff. So I've never had to be like, oh, you should do, you know, don't stop doing that thing because you're not ready for it. It's like most people have never done anything. And so, you know, the vast majority of people don't realize feet are a problem until they've been wearing insoles for a while, inserts or orthotics, and all of a sudden their feet are inflamed and tight. And it's like, okay, well, let's start walking, and you start moving and take your shoes off. So, you know, in general, getting blood flow and getting motion, people feel better almost immediately. And that's I've never had to pull someone back because they're almost at such a deficit. But the question is just knowing, you know, if I throw you into a heavy loaded fascial position, that's not going to be good, but it'll hurt. And you can, you know, you don't have to worry about that as much. So in general, it's kind of like saying, most people come in, they're so weak that it's like, you're just going to get on the sled and push and pull or walk backwards on the treadmill. And that's all we're going to do, because that's all you can do. And so that's the philosophy of ATGs. You start at a place where it's, you know, impossible to hurt themselves, so to speak. Not that people can't do it, but that's what I would really encourage you, and then start there. So, you know, like, and again, that's why I built the 20, like, I had to figure this stuff out. I hurt myself every possible way. Shin splints, worse plantar fasciitis, running wrong way, calf strains, hamstring strains. Because I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. And it's like this program with all of the exercises are like years of exploration. So, with the program, I've got a 20,000 plus word book that walks through everything you could ever imagine. So if you're looking for like value for bang for your buck in terms of like continuing education, that's what I want it to be. But that would be my suggestion for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wicked. Thank you.
Wicked. All right, let's see what we got. Dylan, let's see what you got. Questions?
Yeah, you're kind of already feeding into my question, but I was curious about with your program, if I learned it, how would you take a brand new client, let's say a lady who's been wearing high heels for like her whole life, wants to also do knee zero. How would you kind of mix that in? Would you just start like, okay, if you have foot pain, your feet are really weak, would you just do kind of the sled stuff, the step 0 of knee zero, and then add in maybe a little bit of like tib raises and things? I'm mainly asking because I don't want to like add in too much that we kind of inflame things in their foot and ankle, trying to do both at once.
So in general, what you look at is you start to, I'd say the most important part with this stuff, because some people are worried about their feet and don't want to like take their shoes off at a gym. So like, they don't have an option. Like everybody that walks in my gym, like shoes off. And it's like that, they wear their socks or whatever. But the first part is thinking like, okay, what's the simple ground floor and kind of getting them to move and do this stuff. So it's not like, I'll say that I don't necessarily have my clients in the gym sitting around doing foot exercises, right? There is something like, but what's most important is that you have the awareness to be able to describe to people what's happening in the feet, what's happening in the arch, and get them to understand that. And then I give them like, this is what you need to do. So the people, there's 2 levels of this. So for example, something like this foot program, which is something I'm passionate about, has kind of become something, a life process of mine that I put together. There are people that seek you out for foot stuff. And most of those people are online because they see you in a different way. When you get work with people in person, a lot of times because you're the closest guy to them, you're closest coach to them, I should say, you're the, or whatever, you at the gym that they wanted to go to, or whatever number of things. So it's kind of like, you have to fit their goal. So I don't just sit there and say, you've got bad feet, you need to work on this. I say, these are the things you have to understand. And I make it a scenario that they can. So I take the shoes off, describe them about the big toe, getting that to move. We work on ankle range of motion, mobility, and then we get them to build the arch. Doing those in combination with doing sled push pull with in their socks or barefoot, you can understand how to grade an arch when they're doing the Patrick steps. If you go and do your Patrick step, but then you actually think about grabbing the ground and lifting that arch up into the Patrick step, it might as well be a whole different movement. You'd be amazed at the fact that like, oh, wow. So for example, I'm sure you've had this example of people that are sitting there trying to do the Patrick or the Poliquin step. And it's like, oh, their knees collapse in and their feet turn out. You're like, why can't you do this? They're not using their feet. And if their knees collapse in because their feet are turning out, if you get them to spread their toes and grab the ground, it changes the whole dynamic. But there's so much about it. It's kind of like you have to have an understanding of what's going on with the foot to be able to describe it in a way that they get it. So it's not so much that like, I get it. It can seem overwhelming of like all these exercises for the feet, all the things you have to learn. I have to describe this to people, and then I have to spend time doing 20 minutes of foot crutches and big toe abductions. That's way too complex. Like what you're trying to do is just simply get what's the biggest, the simplest 2 to 3 things I can get. That's big toe abduction. That's grabbing the ground, engaging, building the arch. That's understanding what the tibialis and all the muscles around that. Like it's very simple. What I cue with my clients to do, and it gets better. But the people, that doesn't mean they're going to see the most improvement. The people who are going to see rejuvenated feet that are strong and healthy and can run and sprint barefoot are people that are working on the program online. But just because someone's in person with me doesn't mean that they understand this or know anything about social media or care about this at all. So with those people, I keep a big, simple, broad picture. But with programming, it's like this is built into every single one of my online programs because I can make someone at home sit down, take the shoes off, and do their, the hand foot club and just do it. People don't want to go to the gym and spend 20 minutes on that. They want to sweat and work out. So does that make sense? It's kind of, you have to, as a coach, you have to balance those 2 pieces.
Oh, okay. So it kind of sounds like the very foot specific stuff when it comes to remobilizing the foot is more homework, while at the gym it'd be more proper cueing of the foot with ATG exercises.
Exactly.
If I said that right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because people when they go to the gym, they want to sweat, they want to get a workout, they want to use their time. Like they don't want to nerd out on this stuff. They don't want to sit there and spend 20 minutes trying to move their toe because it's frustrating. It's annoying. They might get it as like, I'll show people on the first time, like, especially, but if I got someone that's coming in from an ankle sprain or that's got a significant deficit, yeah, we're going to work on this stuff. But most people are like, you know, if you're an athlete, you're like, oh, we want to get faster and stronger. It's like, well, you can't even touch your toes. Like, you know, they get this backwards thing. You have to kind of deliver what they want when they're coming in person. And then that's why, like, as coaches, which is why you're all kind of working in this online space, the benefit of being an online coach is not having online clients. It's having a structure. I mean, that can come, but it's like, you know, just as an example, you know, if people like, this whole list. So I'll start it out. This whole list, each one of these is videos of either examples or research or things that I put together for over the last few years. Like that's 10 pages worth of links. Each one of these is a link to a different, and this is an entire drill with 8 different exercises, each one of those. Like that's the online stuff when you're looking at, okay, these are the content you put together to be a coach and build programs and do all this stuff online. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you would never think about doing that unless you thought about being online. And when you do that, then you have a whole level of stuff that makes your in-person coaching more valuable, because you could say, hey, we're going to focus on this, this, and this, but I'm going to send you my nutrition guide and I'm going to send you 5 exercises you need to do for your feet every day. That makes you elite. And that's the feature, because you can't compete with just a mirror that's on the wall with a little, you know, LeBron James squatting like, you know, like a jackass with his little like bar. And it's like, maybe that works, but like the tonal thing, like, you can't compete with that if you're trying to be, you know, like low price. But what you can do is your expertise combined with just focusing on the most important thing. And when you're there, people don't want to sit there and pay you to have them do 14 weeks in a row. It's like, they want something more. And so when you can give them, hey, do this backwards walking, here's a video to remind you just in case why, that's what you want. But that doesn't happen unless you think about how do I approach this business and this coaching thing from a different perspective. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'll rewatch this video several times.
Sorry, it's like going for a drink from a fire hydrant sometimes. All right, yeah. So we can clarify. Matthew, you got any? What do you got?
Yeah. I mean, first off, that's funny you're talking about the Patrick steps, because I was doing those yesterday with like a 6-second tempo with no weight, and my feet were burning.
Yeah.
And that it never happened before. It was crazy. But one thing I wanted to ask you real quick was, so you talked about the functional like lengths and balances. Do you ever dealt with like structural, like people's legs are like significantly different, and what are your kind of viewpoints on that? I know nobody's perfectly even, but enough that you can kind of tell when you're just standing there.
Yeah. So the first question you always have to ask is take a skeptical eye. Like the longer I do this, the less and less enthused I get with the medical professionals. They go in as everything with like a one-minded thing. It's like, oh, well, you got this. It's like, you know, a dietitian or the doctor that's going to look at your acne and your skin diseases and not look at your diet and your sleep and your stress pattern. So like, you know, eventually you start to realize, like, okay, you're just kind of seeing this from one lens just because you have an MD or a PhD or whatever people have anymore. Like, doesn't necessarily mean you're looking at this accurately. So the first thing is you have to take a skeptical eye. You have to get them, take the shoes off, look at their feet and see how well they're engaging. Almost always, and we'll get to the actual structural deficit in a second. Because there's almost always some type of ankle injury. That ankle injury or lower leg injury or fracture or anything can happen at a growth plate when they're younger, which can create a structural abnormality as they get older, right? So that's definitely a reality. But even then, there's still going to be weakness on that side. So it's always going to be some level of, there's a dysfunction on that side. So the first thing you do is you can correct that by actively getting them to work. So when you go from here to that and lift up, let's say they have an inch, half an inch to an inch structural deformity. If you can take that down and decrease that, that goes a long way over a lifetime. The second thing is understanding that what are the typical solutions when you look at it like discrepancy? Well, it's almost always people just saying, we're going to put a heel lift in. But I was like, do you walk around with the heel lift all the time? It's the most asinine, like Lego block view of the human body you've ever seen. Because it's like, guess what? You take a shoe off. Now your hips, instead of being here and then slightly better, it's this and this, this, this. And it's like, you want to give your back something to get fucked up about. That's it. When you think about it from the perspective of their body is going to, like, we are not magicians, right? We can put simple things as coaches. Our job is to pragmatically look at an individual, take a bunch of pieces of information, and put it together. We're big picture. We think big, we put it down, and we tell them what to do. That's all we do. We're not going and working magic, and you can't fix everything in the body. especially if they don't want to. But what we can do is say, pragmatically, what's going to be the best solution for you? Single leg training, develop asymmetries, and to work on strength to actively get the body to support itself. The body will do whatever connotation it needs. So if someone has a significant challenge, they're going to have some form of scoliosis at the spine. They're going to have an asymmetry of muscle development. We can do something to adjust that. But, remember, if it is a significant leg length discrepancy, it's not necessarily the best idea to go and change a whole bunch of stuff. You would avoid things like bilateral loading with super heavy deadlifts and heavy squats. But, getting someone, if they're going to that position, they're probably in pain, getting their glutes to work, getting their core to work, getting their body to engage. The biggest misnomer that we have about the body is that the bones support our weight. The bones provide leverage so that our muscles pull on them, so that we have our hand here and my bicep pulls, it pulls leverage. It just allows us to have more effective movement. The bones do not support weight. Bones should not be touching. They sit suspended in a synovial fluid, plasma, fascia, tendons. They sit on top of one another in this, this basically balls of fluid. And now that's our job, is get that blood flow to the joint that gets synovial fluid back to the joint. We want to get the actual capacity of the muscles and tendons to support that, and we get the fascia to work. But that takes remodeling and rewiring. So, there's some level where people come in with these very nihilistic things about, I've got a leg discrepancy. My doctor said I have to wear these soles. I'm like, great. All you have to ask them is, well, what happens when you take your shoe off? Right? It basically takes that away. So, our job is, I almost always just, I'm not saying ignore, like you take it, you factor in if someone's got this stuff, but it's like, okay, and so what? Like, let's get to work. We got to do this. And ATG is the best process you're going to find for developing that with asymmetrical work. If they have a true deformity or discrepancy, be mindful of how much you load in that spine, especially if they don't have the capacity to control that. You can almost exclusively work on single leg stuff, but then adding in the foot and ankle stuff, you'd be amazed at how much better that gets. Like, I will go from here to here by engaging my feet, and it takes a long time, and it takes a special person because they got to care. They got to actually want to do it themselves. If they don't want to do it themselves, they're not going to do it themselves. I mean, they're going to sit there and say, okay, tell me how to count to 10 for me while I do my bench press, and they're going to leave. It's like, at some point you got to charge enough so that people say, I really want to be here. And then they're going to do the work outside of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that, I mean, I've worked with one or two other people with the structural, but part of that was just me asking for myself, because I think 3/4 of an inch different. And I wore the heel wedge for a long time, and I threw all of them out recently and went to the Barefoot. But I always had a lot of trouble when I would go kind of like do jumping and running on barefoot on the turf, especially during COVID because there were no gyms. And my ankles would flare up real bad, and I always had a lot of problems with those. So I liked that idea that when you get that arch higher, you can kind of correct that a little bit and get closer to even.
Yeah. Remember, no one is symmetrical. Even people that are symmetrical, their organs are on different sides of the body. So it's like, there's no one that's perfectly symmetrical. So, take the view of your body that your body's not a problem. It just may not have gotten the right level of support. Have you had ankle sprains, bad ankle injuries in the past, foot injuries?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I've kind of stopped playing soccer. I played at a fairly high level in college, but stopped because I was missing half the games every year with ankle problems.
Mm-hmm. You'd be amazed, man. And this is not out here trying to sell my program, but it's like, you are the person, like, to a T. It's the same stuff. When I didn't play soccer as well as you did, but like the things I struggle with as well. It's like, you start to notice the stuff. And don't get me wrong, it is not an easy battle, especially if you've had this. Like, I've had, I would have back injury, SI joint problems all the time, and hamstring strain, glute tightness. And it's like, it's not even just one side, it could be both sides, because whatever you compensate, and all of a sudden, I remember I went to a chiropractor one time, they adjusted my back, and all of a sudden it's like this big pop, and they put it back in there. And then I went and lifted 30 minutes later and lowered something down from my shoulders, and pop, went right back. And it was 3 weeks of just this like really excruciating pain and stiffness in my back, because it's like, your body's done this stuff. It can correct it. But when you're ready for it, when you've supported it and the body starts to shift, you can do amazing things to your body. But when you're ready for it, the body will shift and correct itself. So that's what I want to encourage you on, is like, there is a process and you can work, but it starts with your feet, your toes, and your ankles. So, I mean, like, that's what I built this program for, but it's like, you would be amazed at how much you can get back with your body when you start to do this. And it's like, your ankles are just a mass of bone and ligament. They are not like, there's no muscles to work on there. But if you look at the ankles, if you go to physical therapy and they don't take your shoes off, you should walk right out. with your shoes off. Like it's because I mean, how can you look at the ankle and just say, well, we got to do some ankle circles and some calf raises? Like, no, what do you think the toes are there for? There's 28 to 26, 26 or 28 bones, depending on how you count it, in the foot, 30 joints and over 100 muscles, ligaments, and tendons. And yet we're not going to look at that as part of a rehab? I don't think so. So that's what I would get at, is like most therapists and chiropractors are just not going to do it for you. They're going to put you in a heel lift, and it's going to make problems worse, because that passively causes you to shift more weight on that when you're not ready for it. If you load an arch that's not engaged, guess what? It collapses more, and then that causes more structural change. I could go on forever, but I just blows my mind. That makes sense?
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm gonna have to get on the program.
I'd be honored. Max, what's up?
I'm thinking about the ankles, and just off of Matthew's question, I was thinking about like Ben's ankle ability and stuff, and he's got all the weighted ankle circles, and I know this isn't necessarily the foot, but it's obviously pretty close there. So
Yeah,
like,
it's all related. I don't consider myself as exclusive foot offender. I'm a foot, ankle, lower leg, a fall guy. Yeah, foot.
I don't know. I thought you were just like the end of the toes guy, but
I actually, I'm a big favor of the middle toe. It's just like it's one specific toe. But keep going. Sorry.
Eversion, inversion. So I used to mess around with the band thing, and then every week, once in a while, I'll do those loaded eversion, inversion, where Ben's like leaning his whole body weight onto the.
Sure.
Have you seen
Yeah,
that?
the lateral
Have you done
lateral
those?
shifts.
Did
Lateral
you do
shifts.
those,
Yeah.
and like how does that fit in with your philosophy on the foot and stuff?
Oh, so that like I want to be clear. The foot is to the ankle and the lower leg as the hand is to the wrist and the forearm and the elbow. Like you can't, everything is correlated and related. So it's not like I look at things and say, what is the foot? I'm saying everything, it's foot, ankle, lower leg. Those are all correlated. So for example, the muscles, you have some intrinsic muscles that work on your fingers, but the majority of muscles in your hand are in your forearm. The tendons run through your wrist and they go. The wrist doesn't have any intrinsic muscles. It just is the conduit through which they flow and they move, right? So pain at the joint is one or the other. It's above or below, almost always below. I just talk more about the feet because everyone else is talking about calves and all this stuff, which is there. But if you want to look at, for example, your peroneal, so the lateral shift, right? So you get this idea of, just so you understand. So of this example, let's see, lateral ankle shifts. So this is what he's talking about right here. You shift left and you shift right, correct? I'm on the same page, Max?
Yeah. I mean, Ben will like bend his knees and like load even further, I guess. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you can.
it's like
This is
very
more
similar.
Intro, like an intro thing. But basically what you're doing is you're loading left and right. Now, if we look at the perfect. So you've got these, you see right here, tibialis. No, that's not going to show it. I want peroneal. Peroneus longus, also known as the fibularis. So notice these ankles and foot. So the ankle that builds up this lateral arch, you've got, there you go. So these right here, this is your peroneal longus and your peroneal brevis. They attach and they go on the outside of the foot. As you see here, they go form there. And these are the muscles that go on the outside. So this is all lower leg, but they attach to the foot. So that's what you're working on, is lateral shifts. You're loading the ankle laterally, you're shifting left, shifting right. You're getting this peroneus, longus, brevis, tertius to actually work with the body. So for example, you see this going down as a ligaments, but the muscle belly of this is all up in the calf. And so it's not just a matter of like the ankle is literally just going to do what the calf and the foot tell it. But you say, okay, my ankles are stiff. Okay, why is that? Well, my calves are stiff. Okay, let me do what your calf raises. Well, guess where these tendons work? And if you don't have the ability to spread the toes, so notice he's attached on that right outside that fifth metatarsal. They are to the pinky toe what the big toe abductor, the hallucis abductor is to the big toe. They're able, what you spread. So guess what? If you're wearing shoes that, let's see, oh gosh, people, sometimes you get good feet, sometimes you get very strange feet, and it throws me off. Oh God, that's horrible. Let's see, foot. Let's say shoe feet, smashed. All right. So for example, oh God, stop that. For example, let's say you get this kind of thing where the toes are smashed in and you lost this. These are severe bunions, not those. You know, you like a foot binding, or you wear shoes like this where the big toes, the pinky toes smashed in, or something like this. That's most people's feet look like that, right? They kind of have the pinky toes working. Now you take something like that where all of a sudden you can't get this big toe, you can't get this pinky toe to move, then guess what? I lost my print. If you can't keep that picture of any of these feet in mind. Now, if you can't get this to engage this tendon on the outside to move and open the big toe, guess what? This peroneal on the very outside, this muscle belly out here gets stiff and tight. Guess what that attaches to? Your fibula. Guess what that works on is deceleration of this upward movement when you land out here in your running form. Now, this is where you think about, I don't know, Maria popped on for a second, but I think if you follow her on Instagram or TikTok, she's strained her hamstring, right? So there's a certain level of, you start to see this is, okay, if you run and you're doing sprinting form and you're wearing really strict and tight shoes, get that out, that prevent it so that when you're running, instead of being able to, I'm trying to see if a good running form, this is a good one. So you start to see is if right before these guys land, they're going to evert their foot. Sometimes it's hard to find the ideal, let's see, that's one. Well, without delaying it, sometimes you get the sprinting form, let's say running form. Straight on, right? If you can't evert your foot and turn it out slightly to pronate across, then what ends up happening, there you go, perfect, right here. I don't know if that looks, but you see there's a slight eversion of this foot. And actually I can show you, well, I won't pull up there, but if you can't evert the foot because this is getting too stiff, then that attaches up on the peroneal tendon, this outside portion, this ligament that isn't able to, they get short and tight, and that pulls down on this, that shifts the knee out, which changes the relationship of the fibula to the knee, which can put, there's a soleus attaches here too. So the soleus goes across, soleus. The soleus attaches up on the fibula. So if you think about this positioning right here, that's a horrible picture. This is where we're going. So you get your plantaris, let's see, soleus works. This is the back of the leg. That fibula attaches at the tibia fibula, but it's mostly pulling this. So that fibula, when it goes up, it stretches the soleus out, which then engages that. And so if you're thinking about that, you would want, as you go through the foot strike, this is here's a good picture. I'm going to drag this over. So do you see this picture right here? I'll play, yeah. So, you notice the soleus engages when the ankle is bent and the knee is bent. The gastroc is more engaged when the knee is straight. So when you land in the first step, the foot lands here. I land on the outside. This is right after, there's a frame after I pronated. So I land and I'm engaging my foot's pronating across, figuring out how much force it needs, what the surface feels like, and where we need to line up. It lines up, the big toe lands and starts to load the ankle. As it shifts to the weight underneath, the ankle bends and the knee bends. You see the soleus is there, this line right there on the outside here, it starts to engage. That is being pushed up. So as I land and strike with the outside of this foot, it shifts it pushes up internal or with this fibula, the muscle on the outside of that shin, and then it pushes up in that joint, which that pulls on the soleus, which then engages the soleus reflexively as I'm shifting my weight underneath it to pull down to prevent that from straining. Because guess what attaches at the fibula? One of the short head of the biceps femoris. Well, and so you would never think about that, as well as the LCL. So if I can't engage that, then that muscle gets shut up and the hamstring is working too much. So as I step and push, the soleus is working, pulling down, the knee bends, and then I switch away, knee extends because it's pushed away, that force up is gone, and now the internal whole femur and leg internally rotates as I push off the big toe with my gastroc and extend, drive the knee up for the next step. That's the progression that happens every time. Now, if you're wearing restrictive shoes that don't let you evert and invert, then that creates a problem. And now, how does that relate into ankle range of motion and ankle mobility? Is if you don't have the capacity of the feet to spread and move the toes, then the ligaments that go up into the calf and the lower leg get stiff and tight, and then they pull and create stiffness and restriction at the ankle. And then all of a sudden, you don't move. And that's the big thing, is like people look, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's like, well, yeah, it does, because if you have stiff and tight ankles and you don't have range of motion, you can stretch all you want, but until you get the muscles working at the feet and toes to take the tension off of the tendons and the sheets that run up into the calf, it's not going to get any better. So yes, you can do the lateral shifts, but understand the lateral shifts are not mechanically changing anything at the ankle unless you're spreading the toes and using that. And you'd be amazed that once you start to get those toes to spread, flex, create the arch. So grab, flex, and spread. When you do that, that creates the setting within which you can say, okay, now my ankles have more range of motion. And it's not because I sat and did a bunch of random stretches. It's about, okay, can I put these things together? Does that make sense?
So you're saying grab, flex, spread, like all the time when you're doing your training, that's like kind of your signal? Or?
They're nuanced things. So it's spread. Every step you take, you spread your toes. You literally grab the ground. You reach and you grab. So if you can spread your toes is one. Now I'm the boss, I guess. You spread your toes is one. You grab the ground as the other, and then you create the arch, which is basically understanding that, like, that's the understanding that, like, an arch. Okay, it's always, I don't want to get too many like specific tropes, but what I want you to think about is when you're running, the only things that matter is you land on the fourth and fifth metatarsal, and you push off the big toe. That's it. That if you keep that in mind, and you go run barefoot just to feel it, you can't, that puts you in the right space. Your cadence is right, your stride length is right, your foot strike is right. It's fourth and fifth metatarsal, push off the big toe. That over and over again. That with relaxed shoulders, and then you just scale up, you drive the knees up, land there, and that's it. When you're standing and when you're lifting and moving, it's grab the ground, create the arch, like pull with the big toe. That's whenever you spread the toes, pull the big toe. That's your cue for lifting and standing, is you're grabbing the ground and engaging that. You'll feel the glutes engage. It's deadlifts, squats, split squats, whatever it is. And then what that looks like is grab. And that's ultimately just two versions of spread and grab. But the context of, if I'm spreading, it's like, okay, do I have a little bit of eversion, inversion that allows me to foot strike and pronate across? That's where it's not just as simple as grab and spread. It's running is fourth and fifth metatarsal to big toe. And then the like lifting is grab, spread the toes, grab the ground, but lift that arch up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to write everything you're saying down, and you're so fast,
remember,
like an encyclopedia. So it's
that's what I've got, a 28-day program that, like, if you want the best continuing education on this stuff, like, I can, it's there. So my point is that, like, I used to do the same thing too, is like try to study on YouTube and get everything for free. It's like, that's what money's for, man. It just speeds up your success. Just like, you don't have to remember it all, but, and also the point is not what I'm saying, it's what you hear and how well you can communicate that to your clients. That's what I want you to think about. All right, Dylan, what's up?
Yeah, I was wondering, I know creating an arch in the foot is a dynamic thing that you have to, like, flex to make happen, but do you believe you can build what, I guess you could call it a passive arch in someone's foot?
Yeah.
Like if they are like
That's the goal.
flat-footed, then that's the goal. Okay.
Yeah.
That-
So
that's-
think
that's
about it
awesome.
like this. Can you, like, so you would eventually want, and this is the number one feedback I've gotten from people that are doing the program, is this idea that, they go out for a run and it just feels so easy and natural and effortless. It's like, oh, okay. They don't have to think about it. And the other part is, I get that you can do this and you can hear me talking, think, oh my God, I can't even think about trying to get my hip flexors to open up in a split squat. Now I have to think about all this stuff. It seems overwhelming, but it's not supposed to be that way. You do this and then your feet turn on. It's just a matter of, once they turn on, are you doing it's like if you've ever practiced juggling or something like that. It's not like you practice skills and you break it down to components to learn it and build it up. And once you have that, your body just does it. Like on your healthy arches, you're not thinking about it, right? It's only when you've got a collapsed ankle injury you have to really come back from it. But, for most people, it takes a few weeks of just looking at the feet and working on engaging it. And then it just works, as long as you're not wearing like super stiff and restrictive shoes. Like when you run and if you go walk barefoot, your body will naturally, if you go walk barefoot, it may take a little bit if you've never done it before. Your body will shift in very quickly and say, okay, yeah, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is, it's like, I generally spread my toes. I don't think about that. But most people have this amnesia where they've never thought about their toes. It just takes a few weeks of thinking about it, and then your feet turn on. And then when you go for a run, it's like, oh, I felt grounded. I felt my feet connect. It's like, yeah, you don't have to think about that. Like, that's the point, is that your body will do the work for you. It's not magic. You just have to remind it about what's going on there.
Yeah, very, very cool. That's nice to hear, because some people will say, I've seen that are like a flat foot is genetic. You can't build an arch. It's impossible. And I'm like, I don't believe that. So it's good to hear
It's
that.
stupidest. So think about it. It's like, if, you're telling me, so a flat foot would, think about it from the perspective of like, if there's any capacity in which a flat foot would be less advantageous for, a flat foot would be less advantageous for running, then that means that you would have gotten weeded out of the pack not too long ago. Like, this is a few people ago, you would have gotten weeded out. It's like, okay, so if something is actively impeding your capacity to run, to hunt, to get away, to flee, to find safety, that thing is gone. There's no such thing as a genetic thing. We have some things now, but those are diseases and abnormalities. It's not like oh, by the way, my legs just don't work. It's like everyone is surprisingly athletic and capable, but we just lose it. And here's the thing is that, here's the thing is that if you look at kids, people will say this is genetics. It's like no kid whatsoever is born with an arch. They're all born with mush balls for feet. And then over 2 to 3 years, they gain them. Unless they're wearing shoes, their mom never puts them down, they don't run around, they don't play sports, or they have some type of developmental disorder with autism, or, let's say more a autoimmune disease, or let's say a genetic predisposition that affects how well they can walk. But that's not a genetic thing. That just means that they didn't get the stimulus on their feet and on their body. So that's what you want to think about, is like this, it's a bullshit thing, or a very nihilistic of like, oh, it's just arches, it's just genetics. Oh, wait, great. So I have to buy your program and then wear your insoles for the rest of my life and wear your shoes. That's convenient. So it's like, or maybe you think, well, maybe it just takes a fuck ton of work and I have to develop this and it's going to have some time. But, it's like, you'd be amazed at how quickly, once you start to break down, and a lot of these things are to fix certain ailments, but then you start breaking down and moving, it's like everything comes back. It's like, wow, that was pretty easy. So, that's what I want to encourage you on, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How long, if someone is religiously follows your programming, going from an average American foot, how long would you roughly say it takes to build up that proper arch? Like a couple of years?
So it depends on the average American foot's a whole mess there. If you're coming from a significant injury and you've got a deficit, it could be like, I'm still like, my arch on my left is still, it functions and it looks good. It's not as perfect and smooth as my right, it gets there. But like it could be, depending on how well you work on this stuff, like anywhere. And the goal is not that you have something to do for hours every day, but it's like you have something that changes. You do this program and then you have a few things that probably stick with you. Like when you're sitting down on the couch, you just kind of do like a foot hand glove and kind of mess around with your feet. And when you're standing, you're going to stretch out the big toe. Those are like two simple ones. But then it changes the way you move. And the arch strength, the strength of the arch, like you're not going to be able to just sit there and squeeze your toes. It's not going to build up the arch. The strength of the arch comes from running and moving and doing this stuff. But if you're running and your big toes come like collapsing in, then you're not going to build the arch by normal stimuli, because it's not going to be there. So if you have to do the work to get the big toe and understand how the movement happens, and then it becomes a very slow thing. It's like eventually it becomes a thing where everything builds the arch and it snowballs. But it's getting that first momentum going and getting your feet in the right space. You have to reorient your feet so they can work. And then when you have that, then everything else builds up from there. And it doesn't have to be this like constant thing I have to do every day. But the first thing is you have to understand that there's deficits. There's things that are, not working, that are causing you issues. And that's where, like, okay, if you have ankle, foot, lower leg, and knee problems, there's probably something going on with your foot. So we start there and you build up from that and you look and say, okay, let me do the work to address that and then set myself up for success. I'm not wearing socks to cut my circulation off. I'm not wearing overly restricted shoes. I'm not running like a jackass. I'm not squatting, I'm moving. The rest of that, that's where the work happens, right? You got to remember, it's like the reason the foot gets ignored is because it's a bunch of small muscles. But if you ignore it, then that turns into this problem over time where the foot gets weaker. So that's what, you want to think about, is like the foot in and of itself isn't the end all be all. Just like the hand is just a part, it's in service of the rest of the body. But if we don't have the capacity for the foot to do what it needs to do, it causes problems up the chain. So, like in general, 1 to 2, if you don't have any problem as an adult, it's going to be anywhere from a few months to a year, that like kind of process. If like just to get that strong and healthy, I mean, it could be anywhere from a few weeks if you don't have any injuries and you're doing good. Then, but if you have ankle injuries or like chronically collapsed feet, you've never had arches, it'll take the same time it takes kids, 1 to 2 years. It's just because these are a lot of structures that develop. The bone has to shift, the fascia has to shift, the muscles have to adjust, and you have to really consciously learn a new pattern. But, I will say it's only that first month or two that really makes the difference, because the rest of that time frame happens naturally. It's just a matter of saying, okay, am I going to pay attention to this stuff and make the concerted effort to learn a new pattern of moving. So, Range, what's up?
A lot of feet in this call. I've been playing around with my toes quite a bit over here, feeling a whole different sensations I haven't felt before. It's awesome. Just out of curiosity, if you've restored kind of your foot mechanics, have you experienced either anecdotal or with clients like an increase in performance, whether it be, in sport or in strength training, like a stronger foot drive, they feel better doing it? Have you gotten any feedback personally or from a client that way?
Well, I mean, it's kind of an easy question because anytime someone's coming from a place where the feet hurt to the feet don't hurt, that's always a win. And so like, how fast are you when your feet hurt? Not very fast. How fast are you when your feet don't hurt? You're faster. So, that's the easy answer, which is that most people, 9 out of 10 people do not even think about their feet until something's broken. So by the time they're coming and talking and doing this stuff, I was like, oh, well, I could never do that. And then it's that's like saying, does your deadlift go up when you think about actually gripping and using grip work? Yeah, because your deadlift is your neural drive your grip is your neural drive activator for the shoulder, the scapula, the arms, and the core. So the harder you can grip, the more strength you have, the better your deadlift is. So let's say grip and core will always be your weakest point. The stronger your core and your grip gets, the stronger you are, and then it always becomes your weakest point again. So from a personal perspective, it's like, I am faster now than I've ever been before. And I'm faster with shoes off than like I've ever was with shoes. And so, there's a certain point where it's like, okay, the proof is in the pudding for how fast I can get out. And like a guy like Q, the ATG physio, who's just a beast. Like the guy's 240, 6'4" or whatever, 6'3". He's just a monster. And he's training for the Olympics. He's so fast. It's like the fact that I can get out there and keep up with him. It's like, I'm just like the most average. Like I'm just as average dude that ran track and cross country. I ran slow and medium paces forever. And I rode. Like I'm not anything special. I never did any sprinting sports. I was not fast enough. And so, the proof is in like when your body starts to work and fire, it changes. And now people think I run and people think I'm athletic. And it's like, that happens because I got my feet back under me. And so that's what I would say. It's like, it's kind of an easy question, but the proof is in the pudding. It's like, yeah, I'm getting out there and doing this stuff. And I feel it's a whole world of difference. Amazing. And so the way you can also test this with a better, more cognitive or quantitative answer is like, if you have a assault runner or a treadmill that tests your speed, like I'm up to 20.6, I'm doing barefoot, 20 plus miles an hour barefoot. It's like, whereas before it's like, starting to see that it's like, you can see quantitative changes in this stuff. I'm still working on bins 21 miles an hour, but like those are the things you can look at and say, okay, this is working well. And it doesn't mean you can't do that with shoes, but it's just a matter of like, if the shoes allow your feet to work, that's the big thing. Make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Well, if we can do another question, if anyone else had, hey, Corey, there you're perfect. Then I'll have to cut. I got a coaching call to hop on in a minute, but let's hear, Corey, what you got?
Hey guys, yeah. So, quick question. I have a client who tripped off of some stairs a while back last year, and she tore her peroneal tendon and some ligaments, and she had it surgically repaired, the peroneal tendon, and was advised that her ligaments would come back online on their own, but she was still experiencing some significant pain in her ankle many months afterwards. And they went in and they diagnosed that the peroneal nerve had been nicked during the surgery. So they put her on. Sorry, go ahead.
That sucks.
Oh yeah. So she's, she's got this pain she's dealing with, and that's what they told her had happened. So they put her on gabapeptin, I guess, which is a nerve blocker medication. And when she's on it, she doesn't feel the pain as much, if at all, but she just does not like taking medication. That's just not her style. So she came off of it, and now she's just dealing with it because she does not, they said the only way to fix this is that they go back in and surgically repair the nerve. And so I told her, hey, look, I've got a network of really smart people I can reach out to. Maybe someone else has experienced this, but was just curious, wanting to get an outside opinion from what her doctor is telling her. It sounds like she's going to have the surgery, but she said, look, that was worse than the 3 childbirths she gave. She will never have ankle surgery again. So she's just basically conceded herself to deal with this and live with it the rest of her life. And I told her I'd check, see if there's anything that anyone had input on.
So the tough part is on 2 levels. let's see, let me do this thing. All right, so on one hand, this is a good example. So the tough part of this is that there's what they say happened, and then there's what actually happened. So while if they like really fucked up the nerve, then that sucks, because like if they cut it, the problem is that nerve tissue takes all the cells in your body rejuvenate or like regenerate themselves every 7 years, and neural tissue is the slowest of that. So there's two parts, right? So if you fall and you sprain an ankle, then you can strain one of these things. So you've got ligaments around the actual ankle bone, but then you've got your peroneus longus. I think, and it's always, you have to be careful, because I think your perineum is the space between your crotch and your asshole, basically. But I remember, I was like, wait, that's very close. But the point is that if she strained one of these, there's two things, right? So you got your ligaments to go here, you got your tendon sheets, which can be irritated, and then you get your actual tendons. So there's two components, one of which is, remember, if you look at this, oh God, that must be the tendon. That's probably some of the surgery they did. Oh God, surgery scares the fuck out of me when people look at it. You can have irritation that happens there, right? But a lot of this is, it's hard to say, okay, is it actually a nerve thing, or and if they fucked it up in surgery, then that's one of those things. It should eventually heal. It's just going to take time, but it's one of those, like, I just don't really, like, when you look at the body, I mean, you can do a lot of stuff, but it is just amazing when you actually look at the anatomy of the body that we actually have any capacity to do any surgeries at all. So like, I understand her fear around not wanting to do that. What I would say is that there are a bunch of muscles and structures around the foot and the ankle that otherwise would support it. And if you don't have those working, then you end up getting the body that passively does it. So, it's one of those things I tell her, look, a good physical therapy would do a very comprehensive foot and ankle program, but they're not, because I don't know any physical therapists to do that. So the point is, you got to get stronger, right? Whether or not you do surgery, you're going to have to do this stuff before and after. So you might as well do it before to see how well you're actually moving. So, there's a good chance that we can get the muscles. And so, like, look at it this way. So when the feet, let's see, let me see if this is arch. Let's see if I can get, okay, this works. This is an extreme one, but they did surgery, but it shows it. So, but so look at this. You see that's just, okay. You need, this may work better. All right, so you see how the foot arches collapse versus you lift it up and you engage it. Now, that on the outside is putting an impingement pain on the outside of this foot, right? So this is where the peroneal tendon is going to be the outside. So if you lift the foot up, you see how that orients the ankle. So that's what I'm looking at, is saying, okay, they're not going to look and say, they're not looking at her and saying, well, how well is your foot working? They're just thinking of it like, does your nerve work? Did we get the things to put back together? It's like, the body is going to heal itself and get the support it needs. But if you're not giving the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, the fascia, and the bone and the muscles to support the foot and lift it up, then it creates a structural space. So she has to do this stuff anyway. So if she doesn't have symmetrical feet that are strong and she can lift up, then like, that's the first thing I'd look at, because anything that's going to put a lateral stretch and shift on this in what's called pronation or supination, where you collapse in, if that's what's happening, then that you start to see that this collapse on the inside is causing pain on the outside. So,
yeah,
like, I would be shocked if she's actually got any level of awareness about her feet so that she can build and develop that. Because if that's the case, she gets adult acquired flat foot, then that is putting a pressure down on this, and it's creating an impingement. Right. There's no way I would do surgery, just like as a personal preference, but that doesn't mean that the surgery is not good in some cases. But it's like, can she engage and lift this arch up and work on this stuff? Like, that's what I would start with, because if she can't move the toe, then she's not getting the strength. She's got to understand that the lateral arches, what Max was saying, where you do a floss band around you can do put a dumbbell and do loaded inversion, eversion. You can do standing. She might have to start very simple with just getting some unloaded eversion, inversion. So you're just taking the foot and waving it back and forth, doing some ankle circles, getting the toes to move. And certainly spread that out and get that pinky toe and the hand-foot glove. There's little things around that are going to be a big difference, but that's what I'd start, and then just see what goes from there. Because you got to trust that the body has the capacity to support and take care of itself. Like like, that's what I really want you to think about is like the body is capable and strong. It's just a matter of like, if we look at it like a little biomechanical structure, it's like, that's not going to stack up. It's like taking an MRI and saying, or an x-ray. Oh, there's no damage. It's like, well, you didn't look at any of the tissue. Just look at the bone. There's so much else going on. So I've just become very pessimistic about the way that modern medicine approaches things because they're not very good at the fringe cases. And if they fucked her up in surgery, like, why would she go back? You know? And so I would look and say, yeah, like, you know, there's a whole level of foot and ankle stuff that if she can't make an arch, then you got that's good news. If you go look at her feet and it's collapsed and uneven and her foot turns in and your big toe does that, be happy because that means that you got a whole fucking lot of stuff to work on. You got a good client and you can make a big difference in her life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So just building back the structural integrity would be the first.
Always. Yeah.
Cool. Got it. Awesome. Thank you, Graham.
Perfect. So yeah, that's, you know, like when people come to you, it's because whatever's working for them hasn't worked. And just because some MD has told them it's not going to work, like, what the fuck do they know? Like, again, I know how that sounds. I'm just a personal trainer.
Phenomenon, right?
Yeah, I'm just a personal trainer. So what the fuck do I know? But there's a certain level where it's like, our job is not to be, we think wide and put down into the stuff. And it's like, the philosophy of ATG is that the body is not a problem to be solved. It's a certain structures that needs the right thing. And when we get it, people come, you put them on a sled, walking backwards, like, oh my God, I feel better. Like, oh, yeah, I did that. That was great. Look at me go. It's like, I'm just trying to get your body to do what it's supposed to do. And you're the one that's overwhelmed. It's like, when you go get your car, like for me, a car, it's like, I know there's oil and there's gas that goes in and stuff, but it's like, you know, I just want someone to go and tell me and put these things together, but we have to be the mechanics of our body and we can't just have a mechanic go and fix this stuff. So, you know, when people come, it's not that they don't have we always assume that when someone comes to us that they thought about all this stuff, put these things together and they understand the body and have the mental paradigm of how everything looks. That's not how it happens. What happens is they come and they're like, I need my oil change. I don't know where the thing is. And it's like, we're like, really, that's what you want? And that's what every mechanic's like, oh, you with the oil again? Okay. Oh, your tire pressure is low. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, you know, it's so just be strong with that idea of like, yeah, we can fix this because your body can fix it. And if like your body can't fix it, then you do need surgery, which is a rare case, but you know, then you'll have to do this stuff afterwards. So it's kind of like, we're going to get there.
Right.
All right.
Check the boxes first before you last resort of going under the knife.
The thing that kills me is the body, even if you have surgery, what do you do after surgery? Physical therapy. What is physical therapy? Low level strength and movement training. So even if you don't work with me now, it's like you have to do this stuff at some point. You can't just get surgery and think it's going to be fixed. But it's like surgery leaves you no option because you are hurting. It's like, why not just do the post-surgery approach pre-surgery and get the benefits on both sides? If you have to have surgery, I remember someone was saying like they got mad at me because they're like, well, you just didn't really seem to care about my knee. I'm like, no, I cared about your knee. I like just do like, if it's that fucked, you gotta have surgery, but I'm going to treat you like it has a capacity to heal because guess what? We got to do this stuff anyway. So might as well take the positive, optimistic approach. She goes, oh, okay. I'm like, what am I supposed to tell you? I can't help you. You got to have surgery. That's stupid. So
yeah,
I don't know. Any closing thoughts, questions from anybody? Otherwise, you can always message me on Telegram or Instagram. And I promise I'm not trying to pitch you. I just really believe in this program. If you want the best, like this is like I'll show you one little, where's desktop too? I'll show you one little sneak peek of ready to run. This is what you get every day. This is the tips. Every day, you're getting broken down to 28 days where it's continuing education on this stuff and going through that with pictures and nice little 1,000 or so word essay. And then these are the daily exercises broken down into progression day by day over the week. So you get one of those every day for 28 days. And I'm going to put it together to a book. We have an audio recording of it. So like, even if it's just you go do this to be able to tell you what your clients like, there's no way you're going to like, there's you're just going through shoes and everything. So like you're not going to get a more in-depth, but also written for the end user, because I wrote this for regular people. So, that's the goal of why you can explain all this stuff. So if it's there, I think it'd be a phenomenal opportunity. I would love to have you sign up. Next class starts in January. But again, I'm not trying to pitch you on anything. I just think I love it. I feel very proud of it. And so can't not.
So do we have to wait for every time that you're going to start the classes again?
Yeah.
Or
So
can we just take it
basically,
at any time?
Yeah, because I do Zoom calls and it goes through, and it's kind of one of those like, and this is as a level as if you do any online products and programs. I mean, at the beginning of when you start off and you have a program, you're like, I couldn't imagine telling someone no. It's like there's a certain point where if you sell a product, a very easy way to turn that product into like an exciting thing that gives you a chance to market and sell for it is to do launches of it. And that way you can have a simple, I want to pair this product with the social support, with the community, with stuff like that. And then you can do Zoom calls, and like it lets you increase the value without having to increase the price, and makes it a very easy sell.
Okay.
But yeah, right now, like I like to be able to support you. So you go through, everyone's on the same page. You can send videos of your running and your movement, ask questions. And it's like, so I just do it on the month. So the next one starts January 2nd. So that's in 10 days, 8 days. But,
what about after that? Do you do it like just once a year, or?
No, I'm doing it. The plan is to do it every month. And it's,
okay.
it's one of the goal is to get 100 people. And I had 63 in this last time. But the goal is to get 100 people a month. But it's like, if anything has done as inspired, it's like 25,000 people that are joined. It's like, if I had 25,000, if I had 100 people for a month for the next 10 years, that's 12,000 people. Like that, the numbers, like never think small with your opportunities and your options. There is more than enough people in the world. More than enough. 25,000 people isn't even a fraction of a percent of the population of the US. Like, think about that. So that's what I want to encourage you is think big and then work in that direction. But yeah, like for this one, I like the group and it gets everyone excited to work together. But it'll be monthly. So if not in January, at some point. But
I got a lot on my plate right now. So, but I'm very excited.
It's a 20 to 30 minute commitment a day. So that's all. It's just like, and then, whatever, reading it, but I'll be here for you. I'm going to keep doing this. This is my passion project. So.
Hey, Graham, I just, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I just need to say that you did an epic job of kind of breaking this whole thing down. The presentation was so good because I did all this stuff. I was in like a pre-physical therapy school. I've kind of got out of that realm because of a lot of the reasons what you were saying, what physical therapy and all that stuff has become. And I've worked with like tons of guys who have had foot and ankle and whatever issues. But just the way that you presented everything was so clean. My brain is so scattered that I'm just like, oh, he's nailing it right now. But you can definitely tell that you're
practice.
Yeah, you can tell that you're passionate about it. And I was like, I really enjoyed it, but I want
mute. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's kind of you. And one thing I would say just on the note is like just because some of these industries and like the physical therapy, all that stuff, like chiro, like may be marred by the majority of people that approach it, people still, especially older people, still think in terms of a trust of brands, and they like letters. I like the, some level. So you can get I have to do a lot of work to be able to explain to people that like I'm the bare minimum. Yes, it'll be recorded. I have to do a lot of work to get people like to, not a lot, but like at a certain point, it's like when you get started and you for whatever reason, having people that follow you on social media helps the social proof. And people just like, oh, what do you think of this? I'm like, I'm a personal trainer. Do you know this? And I got the bare minimum college degree to just be able to do this. But it's an uphill battle. That does not mean you can't really help people make profound like changes in people's life, because I get people that say, like, this is in 20 minutes with you is better than 10 physical therapy sessions because like you understand it and do it. That takes a lot of work and practice to get to. But that doesn't mean you'd have to do that anyways. But I would say the only reason I would not tell you to go to physical therapy school or chiro school is if it puts you in a fuck ton of debt. It is not worth it to go into a bunch of debt, because if you do that, then what people do is they feel obligated to go and be take insurance and to work for a place that has good benefits and jobs. It's like there is no such thing as security. You are the one that creates that. So, being coach, yes, you can get there and save some money and get the same education, but there's still a lot of benefit if you can afford it and make it happen. There's a lot of benefit to having that credibility, and we do need people that change the way. So, like, totally. If I were a physical therapist, it'd be much more powerful of a message because people would believe that. But it's like now I have to do what Ben does, which is like get the social support and the ground roots to build up and say, yes, this stuff works. But the point is, you don't have to have the letters. But if you do have the desire to go through school, then do it. But just don't go into debt, like a significant amount of debt to do it, because that is where you cripple yourself. And then the real reason insurance or physical therapy is fucked is because of insurance. Because the second you start thinking, well, I can only do what insurance pays, and they only get 12 sessions, and you're only here for your calf, and I can't talk about your feet, that's where you get shoehorned. The best physical therapists I know are acting like coaches. They go out, they think about things differently, they work with people, they pay out of pocket, they do this stuff. The hard part is that when you're a physical therapist, people think insurance, they're going to pay for it. Those are the people you have to get rid of. You have to tell people, no, it costs $150 a set or whatever it is you charge. But like the point is, the credibility and the accreditation can be great for you to really help. But if you let that put you in the debt and then shoehorn you into working for insurance, then it know that you become stuck and you're miserable, and then you become fat and out of shape and in pain, like most physical therapists. Does that make sense? So I want nuance there. I want you to understand that like it can definitely work. A lot of people are like, well, fuck this, I'm going to do that. But it's like, that's a great education. It can help. But
Yeah.
is the cost worth it? You know?
No, I've worked with a lot of PTs who like are out of the box thinkers, but there are a lot of guys who I was colleagues with in school, and they went past where I kind of stopped, because I actually ended up getting lucky and I started working with like professional snowboarders and all that kind of stuff out in California right out of just getting a bachelor's degree. So I'm just like, I don't want to go back and get my doctorate. And now I have three kids later. So I'm like, I'm not going back to school again.
Yeah.
But I've definitely worked with some really good physical therapists. But what I was saying is a lot of my colleagues who we were kind of like coming up with things in our undergrad degrees, like now they seem to get that kind of just like narrow-minded, just everything is by the books. Like, okay, you tore an ACL, let's turn to page 217, print it off and send it to the client. And then it's like,
they'll never look at it.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's rough. And like the fact that you've seen that perspective is good. It's just a matter of, for everybody on the call, no matter where you are, the story you tell backwards is going to be like, I got lucky, I got to do this. All you can ever do with your career is just follow what interests you, do it with your 100% and just be passionate about it, and then just take the next step. Everyone has ever been a successful coach. For me, it's like, I got lucky that I worked at the gym at school. That's the only thing I knew I like to do. And then I got the foot in the door at D1, which is a strength coach place. And I had to figure out, you could be a coach. And then that turned to the next thing. It's always going to be lucky. Everybody will always have this lucky story of who they met and what they did. So don't worry about it on the front end. Say, what am I going to do? How am I going to position myself? Think about it. Be curious about it. But like, no matter what happens to you, you're going to look back one day and say, oh, I was lucky I met this person. You couldn't control that. So like everybody, that especially for young coaches, it's like, it's so stressful to think, how am I going to make it work out? I don't know, but you're going to feel lucky when you look back and say the other way, just as long as you keep giving yourself the opportunity. The only thing you're responsible for every day is follow your curiosity, do it with your passion, and take your energy into it. And then just leave yourself the opportunity to be lucky. Because, luck is when preparation makes opportunity, I think. There's some coach
exactly.
Put that up on your wall. So,
yeah.
Hey, can I just say that anxiety exists for 49-year-old coaches too? So
yeah, even for me as like quote unquote successful, it's like I still am driving. I'm like, wow, what am I? Is this going to work? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to do this for a career? Am I going to, when I'm 20 years later, am I going to like? There is no point where you're like, I've got it all figured out. I mean, maybe if you make a few $1 million, you put it in NFT and turn into $1 billion. I don't know, but then you're bored, right? Like, even if you figure the money part out, the existential crisis of like, what am I going to do with my time? That will always be there. So just find something that interests you and do it. And then when you get struck with that, as Corey said, even if you're 49, it's like, well, it's like, okay, like it's okay. Like that the people look at this, we juxtapose this by the alternative of saying, oh, if I worked for a place and they gave me a salary and a job and a benefit, I wouldn't worry about this. Yeah, but you'd be in crushing misery because you are the type of person that wants to get out and do things by your own book and create your own narrative of life. And that's the beauty. Because if you weren't that person, you would not be doing all the bullshit that's required to be a coach. And coaches are just curious about the world. That's all we do. So because you're that person, if you had the job with a salary and someone telling you what to do and when you should have that paper turned in by, you'd be fucking miserable. So like, the security that comes when they buy your soul and tell you to be on call on the weekends, to answer emails and do whatever customer support bullshit they want you to do, that is soul crushing. So it's like, would you rather have security at the expense of your, quiet desperation and go to your grave with the shang still in your soul? Or, would you be the one that says, I took a little risk and sure, maybe I had to live poor and figure this out and maybe it didn't work and maybe it was a little sloppy and messy and I feel lucky at the end of it, but like, that's life, man. It's just like, that's the beauty of it. So, it's easy to there's a whole lot of palpable fear and anxiety and nervousness that happens. So it's not like it's just, oh, it's all roses and daisies when I tell it back, but it's just like, that's life. And if you feel that fear, it means you're living, and that's what pushes you in a corner. And that as you people, you are entrepreneurs that get out and want to make things and change and do things in the world. You're movers and shakers. We are special individuals. So you wouldn't want it any other way. As I said, you wouldn't want it any other way. So
Graham, you need to start a motivational YouTube channel.
no, that's what I was hoping. You just do the Joe Rogan thing. You clip out some things, put it against some song with America in the background, and go, fuck yeah, that'll be good. Whatever country you want. But all right, people, this has been a blessing and a joy. Let me know if you have any questions, just message me, and I would fucking love to see any and all of you on the program, class 002. All right, take care. I'll talk to you soon.